Good evening, everyone, from Congregation L'Dor Va-Dor. Welcome to PARSON with Rabbi Barry Silver and Pastor Fritz Aufdencamp. Tonight is Monday, May 16th, 2022. Our topic for this evening is abortion rights, and I'm sure we'll get into some other discussions as well. Take it away, gentlemen, and thank you both for being here with us.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for organizing this, and thank you, Pastor Aufdencamp, for being with us. This is one of the hot button issues, abortion rights, one of those issues that you don't really want to talk to family members about unless you have a very good relationship, which I do with Pastor Fritz. So we're happy to talk about the most controversial issues because we find that in the world today, most people try to avoid the issues, or if they do speak about them, they're in very highly partisan mode. So what we're going to try to do is to discuss the issue rationally, intelligently, and with a lot of light and not too much heat. Fritz, would you like to begin the proceedings, or would you like me to? What's your preference?
I'll make a couple of comments.
Go ahead.
First of all, my name is Aufdencamp, and as you can see, I do often camp because I am camping tonight. And this is, I can't decide whether religion is helpful for this issue or not. It seems like religion really creates this chasm when it comes to abortion. This understanding of reproduction is so aligned with different religious views, and so it's going to be with us for a while, I think.
Well, it seems to me pretty clear religion, as it does with so many other issues, is making a morass out of this issue and is preventing people from having any type of rational discourse. The people that are most opposed to women's rights come almost exclusively from the religious community. People who are not religious don't get all worked up about this, and they're able to talk about it in a rational, intelligent manner. It's when people claim to be religious, that's when the problem starts. And when they claim to or attempt to inflict their religious views on others, it's even worse. Fritz, what are your views on abortion? What do you think the government should do about it?
Well, I think they should stay out of the lives of women. I think it is, we decided this long ago that this is a very personal decision between a lady and her doctor. If men were forced to have a vasectomies, I think we would be up in arms about, even though you can reverse a vasectomy very easily, we'd be up in arms if we were required to have somebody do something to our bodies. And somehow we've got to get God out of this thing too, because people claim that they know God's view of this whole thing. Leave God out of this. Let's, as human beings, let's try to come up with some rational way of dealing with this issue.
Well, God help us if we're going to rely on God to get us out of this one.
No, right. Leave God out of it. I want to leave God out of this.
Well, we're definitely in agreement there, as we seem to be on most things. Tell me, the difference between this and a vasectomy is that with this decision regarding one's body, there's another life involved. How does that other life enter into the equation for you?
But this makes it very, very difficult. Life is precious, that's for sure. But until it is viable, I think we need to recognize that somebody else has to make that choice over that fetus. I don't think it really has a voice of its own until it is a viable fetus, and that's the tricky issue for me.
Yeah. So for you, viability is the linchpin.
When it's born, when it can breathe.
Yeah. Well, you actually take the biblical view. The biblical view is that life begins with the onset of breath. It's not clearly delineated like you would find it in a legal textbook, but there are many passages in the Torah which was accepted by Jesus without changing a jot or a tittle of the old law, which indicates that in their eyes, life began at the moment of birth because it's equated with the onset of breathing, as you mentioned. We get that because in the book of Genesis says that God created Adam and Eve, and then he breathed life into them, and they became a nephesh, which is a soul. So the ensoulment happened when they took their first breath. Another indication is with Ezekiel and the dry bones. It said that there were dry bones in the valley, and then they became alive because they had the breath of life. God gave them the breath of life, and then they were alive. It's actually a metaphor for the resurrection of the Jewish people. And
if we use religion, religion really does hold that it's not viable till it's breathing. So where do we get these religious issues that this fetus has a soul and has as much right to life as anybody else? Where does this come from?
Well, Fritz, like many other things in the world of religion, there's a great misunderstanding, and if you'll pardon the expression, there's a huge misconception about the fact that life doesn't begin at conception. All right, that concept is a misconception, and it's not from the Bible. That's from some puritanical effort to prevent women from exercising control over their body. As you know from Christian scripture, there's a line that says, "A woman hath not control over her own body." There's other passages that are very, very hostile towards women's rights. And the Catholic Church, which was the driving force against abortion prior to the fundamentalists jumping on the bandwagon, never held that human life began at conception. They didn't believe that until 1869. So for the vast majority of the church history, they never believed that. It's something that they just concocted in modern times in order to have an excuse. Excuse me?
I wonder what role the sonogram has played in all of this. Being able to see the fetus, what did that do to us?
The sonogram strengthened the argument of the anti-choice people because they were able to demonstrate that there was a living organism. They could actually see something that for most of us was unseen. The Catholic Church initially believed that human life began at a concept called quickening, which is roughly when the fetus began to move, or the woman could feel fetal movement in her body. That was called quickening. And they believed, the church fathers believed from where they got from the Greeks, is that quickening occurred quicker for men than for women. 33 days for men and 66 days after conception for women is what they thought. But this harkens back to ancient Greek mythology. And so they never held that human life began at conception until 1869. And I litigated on this issue, and it gave me great insights into the mindset of those who are anti-abortion. I litigated against the abortion protesters, and the sentiment that I got from them, a very strong sentiment, is that we cannot allow women access to abortion because if they had it and it was too easy, then they would engage in sexual activity outside of marriage and there would be no price to pay. There would be no penalty. It would be too easy for them to get away with it by just having an abortion. So they wanted to do away with abortion in order to make them pay for having sexual relations that they didn't agree with, so they would think twice about it. That was a very, very strong sentiment that I heard. And also there were many of them who don't believe in women's rights and who believe, as the Bible indicates, that the world was in utopia until Eve came along and introduced evil by tempting Adam with the apple, which is a metaphor for being a temptress and a seductress. So it harkens back to a time where women were scapegoated and blamed for the evils of the world. And we should have no room for such thinking. And this is not religious thinking at all. This is just prejudice, male-oriented prejudice that found its way into the religious realm because the religion has been dominated by men. So it's really about time that we, as I say, use rational thinking rather than our own prejudices to make these decisions.
I'm interested to hear what the women here have to say tonight.
That's a good question. Why don't we open it up for comments from others, women and men? Who would like to join with us? Anybody want to share some observations? Sharon, I'm I don't see everybody, so I'm going to have you.
Yeah.
Coordinate
Lita,
that.
do you want to say something? You had your hand up.
I don't have my words organized, so forgive me. I will speak the best I can. I agree, of course, that women should have the right to do whatever they want with their body. However, I don't agree with the abortion, of course. But if a woman is having a bad pregnancy, or if she's ill and the baby's not going to be a healthy baby, why bring that child into this world when it's only going to be a burden and be like a vegetable? It doesn't pay. I don't understand why they would want that. That's all.
All right. Well, that's certainly one of the factors. And it's really quite amazing that sometimes, even if it's an ectopic pregnancy, which can't possibly lead to a healthy baby, the baby's doomed. Mm-hmm. There are some in the anti-choice camp who still want to force the woman to deliver. I've heard people actually say this, or anti-choice. They say, well, she should be forced to go ahead with the pregnancy because God could cure anything. And it's really just completely irrational thinking. And see, the anti-choice people don't want to grant, Lita, what you're suggesting, because if you could say, well, if this is going to affect the woman's health, so we're going to allow it, that would open the door and imply that, well, this isn't really a fully developed human being. And if you could allow abortion in this, then you can allow it for others. So they don't want to open the door. So they take an extremely extreme position, saying that from the moment of conception, it's a human being and you have to treat it as such, which is really a ridiculous thing to say. Do you have any further comments that you'd like to share with us?
Also, the fact that not all the states would do that, so that only the richer people could go to another state to have an abortion.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
how concerned are we for the fetus as opposed to punishing the lady for having this pregnancy? I mean, in our hearts, are we really thinking about the fetus, or how much of us are thinking about women shouldn't be allowed to get away with this? They should pay a price.
That's the prevailing notion that I've encountered. You know, the fetus that I'm worried about and that I care about is the billions of people on this earth who are saying, feed us, feed us. We don't have enough food to eat. We're starving. We don't have adequate health care or water. We don't have an environment that can sustain us. Feed us. And instead, we have brainwashed people who are trying to force women to bring children into the world, an already overcrowded world that they already know they can't provide for. If they have the good sense to recognize that they're not equipped for the heavy responsibility and burdens of being a parent, if they have the wherewithal to recognize that, we should absolutely respect that decision. And the group that prevents more abortions than any other group in the world is Planned Parenthood, because Planned Parenthood empowers women to understand and their reproductive system, and empowers them to have some control over when they'll become pregnant and when not, and helps them with contraceptives. Using contraceptives prevents abortion. But these people, these so-called pro-life people, I call them pro-lie people, these pro-lie people don't even want contraceptions to be used because they think that it's a human being from conception on. And some of the contraceptives work as an abortifacient. In other words, they prevent the fertilized egg from implanting. So you're dealing with people who are highly irrational and making horrible decisions and then forcing those decisions on the rest of us through politics. This is something that we should not put up with, and the religious community has an obligation not to allow this to occur. We can't be silent about it. We must speak up because it's coming from our own ranks.
Rabbi, Steve West has, oh, I'm sorry, Pastor, but
No,
Steve
go
West
ahead,
has his hand. Steve West has his hand raised, and I.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, but it's Judy's hand that's raised, so I'm going to turn it over to Judy.
Go ahead, Judy.
Women speak.
I was going to make the point also about incest and rape, to not allow an abortion for that. An 11-year-old child gets pregnant by her father or something, and certainly she can't support the child. And it has all these economic things, which you were saying, that come right after that, you know, where are the people to adopt these children? They're not online to adopt them, especially if they're Black children, which I think it's going to cause a lot of, aside from the horrible thing that they're doing, controlling women, I think it's going to have huge economic effects on especially the poor people who can't afford to keep having children.
And what role does racism play in all of this?
Well, I don't want to skip over what the comment that Judy made, because I think it's of tremendous importance, that the best way to lift up the economic level of any group of people or any nation is to empower women and to allow them control over their bodies, maybe give them a few grains of seed to plant, as Christopher Hitchens says, and you will see society improve. When we allow all children, or try as a goal to have all children to be wanted children, society improves. When women are considered breeding factories and required to become parents against their will, the standard of living drops, and also the woman is trapped in a cycle of poverty along with her child. And I really have no patience for these people, mostly men, who are saying, well, like Judy says, well, they can always adopt a child. That's a fallacy. So many children can't get adopted. The lines of children waiting to be adopted is heartbreaking. And to add more and more children to that list, making it harder for others to be adopted, is just flat out wrong. There's no panacea where you just adopt all these kids out. And where racism comes in is that if the child is not white, then the opportunities to be adopted are far, far less. The economic consequences are severe. If a woman's not able to raise her child, and very often there's no man involved at all, that means society will raise that child. Society will pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to raise the child. And if the child gets into trouble and hurts someone or kills someone or robs someone and then goes to jail, that's going to be another huge impact. I can't for the life of me understand how naive somebody is to say, I'm not going to pay $300 for the government to provide an abortion. Oh, no. I'd rather pay $3 million to raise the child and to deal with all the consequences of it. It's so ridiculous. It's not that we believe that this is an economic issue. It is not. But don't try to say that it's going to cost us money if we empower women by having access to contraception and to abortion. It doesn't cost money. It saves us from a huge expenditure. The best way to raise taxes, the biggest tax increase will come if abortion is not available.
We have several hands raised. I'll go in order. I think Stanley first, then Steve West, and then Valerie. Go ahead, Stanley.
So, Rabbi and Pastor, where is the origin coming from that government is in charge of this subject?
It's a relatively recent phenomenon, and it has a lot to, it's those societies that want to control women, and also there are some governments that want to increase their population because they want to have more cannon fodder for fighting in battles. In fact, if you go all the way back to Jewish antiquity, there was a Roman historian named Josephus who lived around 60, 70 CE during the Jewish revolt. And what he said is he was explaining Jewish law, and he said that Judaism does not outlaw abortion, but they do discourage it. And the reason they discourage it has nothing to do with the fetus being a human life. It was not considered that. It was discouraged because the Jews were a small minority and needed more people to be able to withstand the onslaught by the Romans and others. And so they wanted to swell the Jewish ranks. So very often when you have dictatorial regimes who want to have a larger fighting force, they outlaw abortion. That's part of the equation. And then also in those countries that deny women's rights, abortion restrictions are sure to follow. In the United States, there were a few laws about abortion. It was a relatively modern intervention. As I say, the church didn't even consider it a fetus or a capital offense until 1869.
The Mormons have fostered the idea that the more fetuses, the more babies we have, the more souls that will enter into the hereafter.
Right. Another interesting aspect of that is that if you notice, if there's ever a contest between who's going to survive, the woman or the fetus, or whose rights prevail, in Jewish law, for instance, the woman prevails every time, there's no question. But in fundamentalist Christianity, the fetus prevails every time. If the mother's going to die to save the fetus, the mother's expendable. And it's actually happened on occasion where that was the case, and right to life people, so-called right to life, came in and demanded that the woman not be able to have an abortion, even though necessary to save her life. Why, you may ask? Because according to them, the mother had an opportunity to be saved by accepting Jesus. And if she didn't avail herself, that's too bad. But the fetus is born in sin. It's born evil. Therefore, it's going straight to hell. And so it needs to be saved, which is really turning logic on its head and civil rights. Let's have somebody else. Steve, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I want to move in a little bit different direction. So, Vela, if what you have to say is relevant to where we are, I'll be glad to cede to you. If not, I'll be glad to speak my piece.
Well, I think I've said this one more. Hello, Steve. Hello, Steve. I think I've said this once before when I meet up with people that are pro-life and anti-abortion. I asked them two questions, right? I said, do you care more about the child that's here that doesn't have a home, or a child that's not born yet? And they'll give me some kind of a cock and bull answer. And then I say to them, well, can you tell me how many children you've adopted, or how many children you're fostering? And more than I can imagine, and more than you can imagine, oh, well, don't have any adopted children. Oh, well, I don't have any foster children. And I told them, I walk right up into their face and I tell them, then you have no right to give me your opinion. You better shut the hell up. And I say that right into their face.
Good for you, Valerie.
Child, and you don't have an adopted child, and then you shut the hell up.
Right on. I'm glad you're on our side.
About me.
Okay.
I'm conservative, but I'm not that conservative.
Right on. More power
Thank
to
you,
you.
Steve.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
Sure. Thank you, Valerie. Actually, what you said is relative to what I'm going to say. I am and always have been very strong on this issue on the side of everything I'm hearing. The arguments are valid. They're wonderful, but you have to start from a point of view. And we're starting from a point of view and not listening to the other point of view. Most of the people on the other side are not these radical nuts. They are people who sincerely believe that life starts at a certain point, whether they're scientists or just regular people. and they sincerely believe that there's murder going on. And they have a very good point, starting from the position that they're starting from. So my suggestion is that we really need to listen to people. I mean, our great arguments don't include everything that needs to be said and thought about the issue, because nobody's saying anything so far here about the rights of that unborn child and where their right to life. So I think that we really need to open our minds up, and the other side needs to open their minds up, because they're much better solutions than all these extremes that we're talking about here and that they're talking about on their Zoom. Because we're looking at the extremes of rape and incest and 11-year-olds and all of those things are really true. And we need to protect those people, and we need to protect those babies from coming into a world where they're unwanted, uncared for, and in many cases not even be able to be afforded. But I really like to hear some sensitivity to the other side. There's very few issues that have, in my mind, two equal sides, two sides that if you just argue on that side, you get a perfect argument. You know, murder is murder, and you can't murder anybody. And you know, we have to be sensitive to good people who feel that way. That's it.
Steve, I want to.
How do you feel when women and men alike, they're okay, they exhume their eggs and they freeze their eggs, but it's okay to freeze a human being and put it in a warehouse? Okay, if you truly believe that the egg, or a zygote, if you will, is a human being, are you telling me that it's okay to put them in cryogenics and freeze them indefinitely, sometimes never to be claimed? Is that okay? I mean, if you believe life starts at conception, then we've got a problem here with science. Freezing babies indefinitely.
Well, are you asking me that question, Valerie?
I'm just putting it out there, you know, I'm just putting it out there in general.
Because that's another one of the great arguments that's new to this discussion, but it's still an argument that is kind of different than the question I'm asking. The question that I'm asking is, with all of these things that are reasonable, rational, it depends on where you start, where you end up. We need to listen to each other more, and we need to look at all of the issues and how can we develop a system where children who are born and not able to be cared for, there's no system. The Republican or the crazy ones are saying, oh, it's up to the parent. They got to pay, or the woman, they've got to pay the price because they shouldn't have gotten pregnant. Just say no. But I'm talking about a more an approach where we try to understand each other's view and work together to improve the system.
I do want to compliment Steve on bringing that up, and I do want to address what he's saying, because I think that's an extremely important point. That's why I asked Fritz, what do you think about that? I said, it's not just the woman's body. There's another life form involved, and there's another more to the issue. So let me address the very cogent issue that Steve raised. And I think you're right on that we need to talk to each other and listen to each other. So I've been discussing this issue for decades and trying to reach common ground. And I've listened a lot to what the other side is saying. So let me just share with you the benefit of some of my experience. There's some people who are very, very hateful, nasty, awful people on the other side. One of them was Randall Terry, who led Operation Rescue. And he was an anti-abortion protester. And he said this, he said, you have to let a wave of hate wash over you so that you can go out and fight these people. So he was one of the bad guys. But there's a lot of people, like Steve is mentioning, a lot of people who are really good, honest, sincere people who really are considering the life of the fetus and want to do the right thing. And then there's another group of people, kind of in the same camp as the first, who are completely brainwashed. Now, like Steve says, there's a lot of very sincere people, but being sincere doesn't mean that you're not brainwashed. There's people who sincerely believe that they're going to go to heaven if they say the right words and make the right propitiations. They're extremely sincere, and they're completely wrong. And if they act on these sincere beliefs, they're going to do crazy things. So sincerity isn't necessarily the issue. But there are some people who aren't even religious who just feel this is a living entity, and we should be cognizant of that. So let me just suggest to you what I think is a rational way of looking at the whole issue, like you suggest. First of all, well, we have to ask, at what point does life begin? And what are the rights of this fetus? And now we have to compare that to the rights of the woman. The rights of the woman we already know. Okay, the woman is entitled to civil rights, and she should have some autonomy over her body. Now let's look at the fetus. I make this suggestion to consider. At the point of conception, when the fetus is a fertilized egg, it doesn't make sense to consider that a fully developed human beings with all the panoply of rights that we have. The egg is the same as a human being in the same way that an acorn is the same as an oak tree, or the same way that an egg that we eat when we have scrambled eggs is the same as a chicken. They're different. The egg is not a human being. What the egg is, it's a potential human being. It doesn't have limbs. It doesn't have sense organs. It doesn't think. It doesn't feel. It feels nothing. It's not anything that we would consider a human being. It's a potential life in the same way that the blueprints of a house are a potential house, but it's not a house. If I burn down the blueprints, I haven't burned down a house. The problem with the other side is that they say from the get-go, it's a human life. And therefore, even in vitro fertilization would involve killing people because you have fertilized eggs that must be destroyed. In the same way also, if the egg is a human life, then God, according to them, performs more abortions than humans because most fertilized eggs spontaneously abort, which means that God is committing mass murder according to their way of thinking. That doesn't make any sense. Also, they don't have a funeral if there's a miscarriage, and they don't trace their age back to conception. They trace it from birth, and they don't say that the census taker should check who's a fetus to take the census. So they only say it starts at conception when it comes to this issue. On the other hand, I think the pro-choice people are not doing a good service for themselves or the argument, and I agree with Steve, they're not presenting an argument that's rational and listening to the other side when they say, it's my body, I'll do what I want, as if there's no other issue involved. There is. There's a developing fetus, and that developing fetus begins to take on the qualities that we associate with being a human. However, let's look at it scientifically, okay? The fetus doesn't feel anything until the nervous system is connected with the brain. The way we feel pain is that nerves experience something, send that up to the brain, and then we feel pain. Until the nerves are connected to the brain, there's no feeling and no sensation. That doesn't happen until maybe 4 or 5 months after conception. Also, the fetus doesn't think as even like we do. It looks like a salamander and a fish and a reptile until fairly late on. It doesn't start thinking like we might think until very late in the pregnancy. That's why I believe that Roe v. Wade was a very good compromise. It said up till 6 months, the woman has complete control. She can make that decision. And most abortions, if she wants it, she could have it within 6 months. After that, the states had the ability to start enacting laws. To me, that's a compromise. I mean, some people say, oh, that's an extreme position. I think it is a compromise. It's not saying that you have the absolute right to an abortion all the way to the 9th month. It's saying that there's restrictions on it. By the way, I don't think viability is the issue because viability keeps moving back. A fetus used to be viable only when it was born. Now a fetus could be viable at 6 months, 7 months. Maybe in the future it could be viable at 3 months. I don't think that's the issue. The issue is, does it feel? Can it think? Does it feel pain? And then also the woman's issue, the rights of the woman. And then I would also throw this in, the impact on the planet. of forcing women to bring children into an already crowded world. You know, the best thing we could do for the environment is to have less children. And so I, as an environmentalist, want to side with the woman and her rights, because there's an extra bonus there, as far as I'm concerned, for the environment. That's a very long answer to a short question, but it's a very complicated issue. And I'll just sum it up with this, that phylogeny recapitulates ontogeny, which means that the development of the fetus in the womb duplicates evolution. It starts out as an egg, like an amoeba. It's then engulfed in water, like life began in water. It then looks like a fish. It then looks like a salamander, and it then takes on gills. It then grows a hair. It has hair like mammals did, and then it loses the hair. And then there's rapid brain growth around the beginning of the 7th month, which corresponds to about 2 million years ago, when our brains develop very rapidly, which is why the fetus doesn't fit through the birth canal very well, because the rapid brain growth of humans happened faster than the woman's body could accommodate, and she wasn't able to walk very well. So that's why it's hard for us to be born, humans compared to other animals. Our heads are too big, and what evolution did, it caused the head to expand even more in the first year of birth. It's called neotomy. It actually delayed the development of the fetus until after the birth, because it couldn't fit through the birth canal. So that's something that we need to look at if we want to examine this rationally, which most people, unfortunately, never do. Now let's open it up to more opinions and questions.
I want to comment on, there's a human element to all of this. You've got a mother that has this baby growing inside of her. And I really feel that, I feel really kind of out of it, so to speak, because I really feel she really has a sense of what she's going through. And I really want to respect what she's struggling with this baby growing inside of her and what she's going to do with it. I really would like to leave it to she and her doctor. It's a horrible struggle they go through, but I do not want to be the one that brings from the outside that comes in and says, this is what you have to do.
Yeah, thank you, Fritz. You know, we men don't have to go through any of the vicissitudes or the risks to our health or our lives of giving birth. And therefore, that's why I believe, like you say, Fritz, the decision should rest on the mother. We men should be so grateful for women bringing us into the world and going through that. And childbirth is a wonderful blessing when it's chosen. When it's forced and inflicted, it's a curse. And bearing children should never be a curse. And especially for women who are younger women, who they should absolutely have every right to make that decision. I agree with you. Who else?
I may have said this already, but 30 years ago when I was in college, I probably was very anti-abortion, much more so than I am now. Because that was something the world I grew up in. And yet my wife and I, we were very aware of the population problem then. So that's when we decided we were going to have 2 kids to replenish ourselves on the planet and adopt 2 kids to take pressure off the planet. But back then, I really did not understand this whole problem nearly as well as I do today.
Well, you know, Fritz, that was an extremely moral and ethical decision that you made, far more than the decision of these other people who are just telling women what to do with their bodies and force them to bring life into the world. That was an extremely moral decision. I compliment you on and your wife on recognizing these issues.
We also liked kids, okay?
That's a great solution. Really good solution. Yeah. Well, I wrestled with some of the same things you did, Fritz, when I was bringing kids into the world. So when I brought them into the world, when they were old enough to understand, I said, you know, I had some second thoughts about bringing more kids into the world. So you guys, I'm bringing you into the world on a condition, okay? The condition for you guys being here is that you guys are now mandated to help being part of the solution and not the problem. So you guys have to be activists, and you guys have to make this world a better place. So that was their commission. Anybody else?
More women.
Lois, do you have any comments to make? Thank you for joining us. Shayna?
Mm,
Lois, I can do it. You're unmuted, Lois.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure to be with all of you this evening, and I enjoy the discussion, the discourse back and forth. And I agree with most everything I've heard. So there's nothing I can really add to the discussion. Sorry.
Let me also remind everyone that we're always open to debates. And I've contacted Republicans and anti-choice people and asked them if they would like to take on this issue. I have one person who may, but if you know of anyone on the other side, let us know, because we're always looking to air both sides of every issue, especially this one.
The word murder really carries a lot of heaviness to it. There must be a better word we can come up with to support that side, other than using the word murder.
Well, that's the problem, that once you say that it's a human life from the get-go, now you're saying that this is murder. And now that's why the Republicans are having a lot of consternation, because if they're going to claim that this is a human life, then the question is, okay, it's a human life and you just terminated it. So what's the penalty? They're forced by their own argument to say the penalty has to be, you have to charge them with murder. And the woman, the mother, the doctor, the guy who drives her to the abortion clinic, the people in the clinic, they're all conspiring to commit murder. And so if it's really a human life, then you're stuck. And that's why they're having so much issue. It's like, it's been said, like the dog who chases after the car and now catches it. Okay, you got the court on your side. Now it looks like they're going to say it's a human life from conception. Okay, what laws now do we have? Because you know there's going to be a huge civil rights movement and an underground for getting abortion. So what penalty is now going to be paid by these people? That's an issue that they have to wrestle with.
Judy has her hand up if there's nobody else.
Oh, go ahead.
I have a question. What happened to the separation of church and state? I read this little thing like, keep your rosaries out of my ovaries. And,
Yeah, that's a good one.
What?
I don't understand, because since I think it's in the Constitution that the church and state are supposed to be separate, and now the church is making the decisions for everybody, whether they're in the church, out of the church, and the men seem to have no responsibility, like they didn't do it, had no part in this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk tachlis and say what's really going on. Okay. This is a clear violation of church and state, but the way the pro-life people frame the issue, they never say it's a religious issue. They'll never say we feel this way because of religion. They'll hide it. It's similar to when they had the Choose Life license plate. Okay, I was involved in protesting and trying to litigate to get rid of the Choose Life license plate. So what happened was the Choose Life license plate was explained in the on the website of the Choose Life license plate, and it said some guy was driving down the road and God spoke to him and God told him that you should have this license plate, and that's why he enacted it. So I claimed, well, this is a church state violation. He's saying that God spoke to him. 2 weeks later, the website was changed. There was nothing about God at all. It just said that I just had this idea. So what's going on here is you have people who are inflicting their religious views on others, but claiming that has nothing to do with religion. What they want us to believe is that, oh, no, this is just common sense. Of course, it's a human life from conception. It has nothing to do with religion at all. This is just common sense, and it's just the will of the majority, and this is just how we feel. But obviously, they're misrepresenting themselves. And it's kind of funny because,
More?
well, Fritz, you know the story about when Peter would deny Jesus 3 times. He said, before the cock crows twice, you're going to deny knowing Jesus. And he says, never. These people are denying their own Bible. They're saying, oh, no, it's not from the Bible. We don't get it from the Bible. And they deny it over and over. That's exactly where it's coming from. And you're totally right, Judy. It's a blatant violation of church-state separation, no doubt. Anybody else? Sharon, you want to opine?
I think I agree with what everybody's saying as well, and I think that abortions have their place, and especially in the cases of rape and incest, and that the women own their own bodies, and the government has no right to do this. But
amen.
They're doing
All
it
right.
anyway,
Well,
So
yeah. Well, I think we've covered that issue. Like I say, I'd love to debate it. If I can arrange it, I'll let you know. Let's just take a few more minutes, if we could, just to comment on this shooting. Fritz, you must have something to say about that.
Oh my goodness. This love affair we have, I really still think it's a love affair. We have guns and all this hate that's going on in our society. And guns, somehow they fit with that way of expressing our hate. They just go together too well.
Fritz, would you agree with me that
I know,
guns?
would never agree with you.
Will you agree with me this one time that guns are the original sin of America, that we use guns to enforce slavery, to exterminate and wipe out the buffalo, and we use guns also to commit genocide against Native Americans, and that we've revered the gun. And the gun, you think about it, is like an idol. It's a metal object that is worshipped. It's a metal object that is worshipped as our savior, and it's idolatry, bowing down to the gun. I saw someone at the abortion protest, and it was a woman wearing a t-shirt saying, I wish that my body had as many rights as guns in America. And I think that pretty much says it all. I went over to her and I said, amen, that's a beautiful t-shirt you have there. And we are...
I grew up with my cowboy outfit, my holster, my guns, and it gave me a sense of power. I really was somebody when I had this gun in my disposal.
Right. And for people who feel powerless in their lives,
yes,
or
absolutely,
angry and jealous of others, it's just too easy to take a gun and wipe people out.
It's too easy.
Yeah, it's obscene that the politicians are doing absolutely nothing about it except for thoughts and prayers. If all we have is a prayer, then we haven't got a prayer. It's time to stop praying, because these killers are preying upon all of us. And it's time that the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness was seen as more important than the right to own a gun. I personally, I have no use for them. You know, they say, oh, you're trying to take our guns away. Yeah, that's right. Trying to take guns away. I don't think anyone has the need for semi-automatic weapon, and I would take those away. I don't think anyone who has any type of anger issues, who's ever assaulted anyone, who's threatened people, they should forfeit their right to own a gun. I think that people who have been have a track record of assaulting women or threatening women, they should not be able to own a gun. I mean, it's too easy to get all types of weapons, and the politicians believe that mass murdering maniacs have the right to own semi-automatic weapons that are weapons of war. This is crazy. And I don't understand how these people can even stay in office, or how anybody could even give them the time of day. They have no business representing people if they have such extreme views.
The pendulum swings both ways in society, and the pendulum has swung so far to the gun rights that it's got to start coming back. What's hard to understand is I have an older brother. We were raised on the same farm family, yet he has an assault weapon on his bedroom wall. And I have never owned a gun other than when I was a kid with my 6-shooter. I don't know how that happened. I just don't know how that happens.
Well, Fritz, you're a good example of how people are able to be independent thinkers, because you certainly have thought independently of the milieu that you were raised in, and I compliment you on that. Yeah.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Hi. When you spoke about guns, what brought to my mind is people that feel that they're killing a human life are some of the people that are killing creatures that God put on earth, which I don't even feel we have a right to kill unless maybe it's for a purpose that's needed by humankind. But to go out and hunt and kill baby animals, baby birds, mommy birds, daddy birds, whatever the creature is, why do they feel that that's okay? But then to kill an embryo is not okay.
That's a really good point that you raised. The embryo, especially at conception, doesn't feel anything. But a sentient being feels the same way we do.
Mm-hmm.
The pain centers of a cow or a deer are the same as ours. The pain that they feel is the same. The pain of the fertilized egg or the embryo in the beginning stages is nothing. So that's why they're not thinking rationally. This is a form of what we call speciesism. It's like they don't care about all life. They care about human life. And most of them don't just care about all human life. It's usually life of white males very often, or humans that look and talk like they do. It's not just white males. It's just a lot of people just care about people who look and sound like them. But I couldn't agree with you more that there's a sickness in the human heart if you take pleasure out of killing something. And to teach that to a child is child abuse. If you take an average kid, let's say an 8-year-old kid, and you give him a gun and say, go shoot that deer, that kid is gonna be repelled in horror and think, oh no, I could never do that. And what happens is there's actually something called the youth deer hunt that's paid for by taxpayer money, which I've protested quite a few times. And what they do is they take government funds and sponsor a youth deer hunt. And we know from anecdotal evidence, this is usually what happens. The kid goes out with the dad, and the dad says, here, kid, and he could be 8 years old, take this gun and shoot that animal. And the kid says, I don't want to do that, Dad. And he says, what are you, a sissy boy? You a sissy? Take that gun and shoot that animal. And the kid starts crying, and he's traumatized. And they'll put the gun in his hand, and maybe they'll help him pull the trigger. And after he does it, the kid is shocked because the animal doesn't just drop dead. Usually the animal's bleeding and suffering, and it's a grisly scene. And what the father does is he subjects them to that type of abuse over and over and over again until every drop of sympathy and compassion and feelings and concern for others is gone. And when that happens, you not only train a child not to have sympathy for animals, it spills over into human beings. And they've also found that most of the people that commit these mass murders, they usually started out with animals, and they also started out with video games. These are two things that are like stepping stones to committing mass murder against human beings. Doing it with animals, doing it on a screen where you're rewarded for how many people you can kill. These things are horrible influences. But if you say that you don't like them, you're viewed as an extremist or a fanatic. Okay, brand me a fanatic. I don't see any need for vicious, violent, vulgar video games. I think they should be outlawed, not just for people under 18, for anyone. They serve no purpose other than to be training films for mass murder. Hunting, I think, is a scourge upon our species, and it doesn't serve any valid purpose. It is one thing for people to say, well, we have to thin out the herd or we'll get overcrowded or something like that. But to take pleasure in killing an animal, there's something sick about that.
And also trophy hunting, where we're killing animals that are going to be extinct so you can hang up a bigger head on your wall. I mean,
Yeah.
it's disgusting.
By the way, it's also against Jewish law to hunt for pleasure. It's
Exactly.
against Jewish law.
Corey just reminded me that this kid on his 16th birthday was given a gun by his dad for hunting, correct?
That's right. His 16th birthday. Yep.
Yeah, and he used it for hunting.
He sure did.
Hunting human beings. This is the acceptance of guns in our culture is the original sin, and unless we atone for it and repudiate it, we're going to see more and more carnage.
I've never heard about the gun as the original sin. That's kind of a interesting thought, but there's a lot of value to that. I think that.
Well, I conceived of the idea.
It's original with you.
Yes, I made that up, and if you want, you're free to adopt it.
I like it.
All right. Well, I've enjoyed the discussion with everyone. Thank you for your input. If anybody want to close us out, Fritz, you want to have a final word, or anybody else want to have a final word?
I just want to say this summer will be very interesting because with Ukraine and how long we can hang in there with Ukraine and what we're trying to do, and with this Supreme Court decision and what's going to happen to the people here, it will be an interesting summer.
Well, Fritz, it will be a fascinating summer, and I'm glad that you and I will be here to discuss it and to share our ideas with others, and hopefully bring in other thinkers as well. I really appreciate the people who participated in this broadcast, this Zoom. Thank you very much, everybody. We will be tackling all the controversial issues, and hopefully in the form of debates as well. Thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you in the future, and keep speaking up.
Okay.